Bonjour et bienvenue à une autre vidéo de français avec Monsieur Robichaud. Hello and welcome to another French help video with Mr. Robichaud. In today's video, we're going to be looking at les adjectifs en français, so French adjectives. And today we're going to be looking specifically at their masculine and feminine forms, and we're not going to be talking about their singular and plural forms at all. So, as always, to start off, let's begin with reviewing what exactly is an adjective. Well, an adjective is a word that describes a noun. It's used to give more details about a noun, or more specific details about a noun. In English, adjectives usually come before the noun. For example, a tree, and if we wanted to add an adjective to this sentence, we could say a big tree. So, big would modify the noun tree, and big would be the adjective because it's giving you more details about the noun. Now, in English, we don't have masculine and feminine like we do in French, so we really don't need to do anything when we want to describe either a boy or a girl with an adjective. But in French, our adjectives can either be masculine or feminine. So the adjective has to agree with the gender and number of the noun. So if the noun is masculine, the adjective has to be masculine. If the noun is feminine, the adjective has to be feminine. If the noun is plural, then the adjective also has to be plural. So everything has to agree with each other. Alright, so over here we see an example of an adjectif in French, and we see the word grand, which in English means big. So obviously this is going to be the masculine form of this adjective, and if I want to use it in a sentence, I would use it as something like un grand garçon, a big boy. Now, if I wanted to transform this adjective grand into feminine, it's very easy, and most adjectives will follow this rule. All you need to do is add the letter E to the end of the word. So, grand, with the letter E, would transform into grande. So, for example, we would have une grande fille. So, basically, when we want to change the adjective from masculine to feminine, about 80-90% of the time, all you have to do is add the letter E to the end of the word. Now, as always, there are exceptions in French, so let's take a look at a couple of those exceptions. As mentioned, not all adjectives follow that simple rule where all you have to do is add an E. Most do, but sometimes, as I said, we have exceptions. So here are some of the most common exceptions that I've noticed when conjugating, but when transforming adjectives from their masculine version to the feminine version. So the first one, and one of the most common ones you'll see, is adjectives that end with if. And when you transform them to the feminine version of the adjective, the if turns into a ve. So what we've done is we've traded the f for a v, and we followed the usual rule of just adding the e. So an example of this would be the adjective sportif in French, which means athletic or sporty. And when we transform it to the feminine version of the adjective, it would change into sportive with a ve at the end. So we've traded that f for the v, and we've just simply added the e. Another common one that you'll see quite often is adjectives that end with eux, and these transform into euse adjectives. So for example, you have fameux, which means famous. It ends in eux, but when we bring it over to the feminine side, it's going to end with euse, fameuse. The same thing that happens with adjectives that end in eur. They also turn into euse. So for example, you have rêveur, which is a daydreamer or someone who daydreams, and when it goes over to the feminine side, it's going to change into rêveuse. So there you have that euse again. Now, the last one I've noticed, and there are many more, so don't take this is all the exceptions, but the last common one I've noticed is adjectives that end with teur. So it's kind of like the last one, except there's a T before the EUR, so this can kind of get tricky sometimes. So you really have to pay attention to the letters at the end of the word. And these ones change into TRICE. So for example, you have acteur, which is an actor, but it can also mean to act, so someone that's acting. And when you go over to the feminine side of the adjective, it turns into actrice. So that EUR turns into the TRICE, as you see here. Like I said, there are a lot more exceptions, but I didn't want to make a video just of exceptions. So here are the most common 4 exceptions that I've noticed while doing French. So as always, I love to end my videos with some practice questions just to make sure that I explained things properly in the video and to make sure that you understood things properly in the video. On the right hand side of the video, I've also posted a little bit of a cheat chart with the exceptions that we learned in the last slide. And like I said, most of the time, the adjective will follow the very simple rule where you just have to add the e's. But sometimes we'll run into exceptions. And like I said, these are not all the exceptions. But let's get started with our practice questions. So the question asks us, transformer les adjectifs masculins au féminin. So transform the masculine adjectives to their feminine versions. So the first one we're going to look at is grand. Now, it doesn't end with any of the exceptions that I've noted here. So I'm going to go with the normal rule of adding the e. So we have grande. The next one I have is plat, which means flat. And if I were to transform that into the feminine version, it would be plate with an e at the end. Now, the next one is rouge, which we all know is the color red. And when you transform it into the feminine version, it becomes rouge. There's actually no change because the word already ends with an e. We don't need to put two e's at the end of the word because that would just make us look silly in French. The next word we have is active, which is active. So if you notice, this ends with the if, which is right up here. And what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to swap the f for the ve. So it's going to turn into active, which just happens to be the same way it's spelt in English. So notice we've changed the f for a v and we've added the e. Next one is courageux. If you notice, this ends with the EUX, and this means courageous in English. So I'm going to go to my chart, look at my EUX, and oh, look at that. EUX turns into EUSE. So I would know my answer is going to be courageuse with an EUSE at the end. Next one is trompeur, someone who's untrustworthy or someone who likes to trick you. Even you could call this deceitful in English. So I noticed that trompeur ends with EUR, so I'm going to go to my chart. And EUR turns into, look at that, EUSE, which is going to be trompeuse. And the last one is créateur, which means creative in English. And if you notice, it ends with EUR again. But before the EUR, you've got the letter T. So instead of using the EUSE, this time I'm going to have to use this TRICE. So basically I'm going to remove this EUR or the TEUR and I'm going to trade it for TRICE. Créatrice. So I hope that wasn't too difficult and I hope it was easy to follow. As I did mention before, most of the time in French, when you get adjectives and you need to transform them from masculine to feminine, most of the time all you've got to do is add that letter E to the end. There are exceptions, as you saw here, and there are even more exceptions than this, but as a beginner French learner, you're not going to be dealing with too many exceptions, and if you do, I mean, hey, no one's going to criticize you for being wrong, especially if you're just learning French. So for homework, if you want a little bit of extra practice, I'll put a link to this worksheet in the description, and all you're basically doing is transforming the adjective from its masculine state into the feminine state. So, for example, number 1, it says, voici le stylo bleu. And it's going to give you another sentence. For example, voilà la craie blank. And it wants you to transform the word that's underlined into a feminine version of it. So the sentence may not be the same, obviously, because you have le stylo, which is masculine, and you have la craie, which is feminine, right? Le is for masculine, la is for feminine. So it can't be the same sentence because it's going to have to change from masculine to feminine. So don't worry about the sentence changing. You don't need to do anything about the sentence. All you need to do is transform this underlined adjective into its feminine form. So for example, this would be voilà la craie bleue with an E at the end. Okay? Super simple. All you've got to do is fill out the adjective. So I'll link that into the description if you want some extra practice. If not, if you're one of my students, I've already posted it on your Google Classroom, hopefully. So, unfortunately, our time has now come to an end. So that's all for our video today. Au revoir et à la prochaine, mes amis.